Hi, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is Michelle White, Associate Executive Director of FASA, and we have a great webinar and call planned for you this afternoon for those that are aspiring superintendents. Also joining us on the call today is Executive Director John Mixon. And the webinar is being recorded today so that participants and FASA members can access it to date. While we did receive some questions for our speakers to address, you can also ask them live via the chat window in your control panel or in the question and answer box. And I encourage you to send those throughout the webinar. FASA is happy to partner with the Florida School Boards Association for today's webinar, and joining us today are Bill Vogel and Andrea Messina. Bill is a former superintendent of Seminole and St. Lucie counties and now consults with FSBA for superintendent searches. First, we'll hear from Andrea Messina. She is the current executive director of FSBA and works with school boards in their searches for appointed superintendents. She's also a former school board member and provides a different perspective to the process. Andrea, at this time, I'll turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michelle. Can you hear me well?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So first, I want to thank everyone for their interest in potentially being a superintendent. And when we ask the question of, are you planning to be a superintendent someday, that doesn't necessarily mean this year or next year. It could be someone early in their career who has decided to join us because eventually in 5 or 10 years, they may want to be the superintendent of a school district. And so we're going to try to kind of speak from a very broad perspective. I do want to let your participants know that currently the Florida School Boards Association Superintendent Search Team, we look at it as a three-legged stool. We have 3 people on our team, but it's also important to note that not every school district uses the FSBA to do their superintendent search. So we're going to talk about the way we do searches. Other companies, search firms, do things very, very similarly. And so we can answer some of those questions as well. But this team of 3 people, and I'm going to go through it in just a second, we have worked together on a number of searches in the last 3 years. The reason that this is the team is because I believe, as the executive director of FSBA, that Dr. Vogel and John Reichert really helped round out the perspectives needed to do an effective and efficient and successful search. Most of the administrators in the state probably have crossed paths with Dr. Bill Vogel multiple times over the years. He is a retired superintendent. As you mentioned, he was in more than one county as a superintendent and certainly in some other counties as a deputy and assistant superintendent. But he retired from Seminole County, and he was also in St. Lucie County, as you mentioned, where he was the superintendent of the year for Florida at one point. He also serves as a mentor to a number of new superintendents, and he helps do some superintendent training, both through us and through the Superintendents Association. So he's a very crucial part of our team. And John Reichert, who is a retired executive director of HR and professional standards, also from Seminole County, who also serves as a consultant, and he works in a lot of HR departments across the state in school districts. They bring him in to help do some analysis and overview and try to help them get best practices and on track. So we have a former school board member, that's me, former superintendent, that's Bill, and then a former HR person, that's John. So we kind of have all 3 perspectives, and each one of us can be contacted at any time during a search. I know Bill and John and I frequently receive texts from candidates and potential candidates. Hey, got a question, can you give me a quick call? So I just want to make sure everybody knows that they can always access and call any one of us for questions. Now, most people are aware that in Florida, not every school district has an appointed superintendent. However, those that do certainly are the ones that we're going to be honing in on, because the elected superintendent is a whole different ballgame. But you can see from the map that I have prepared here, the school districts that have green stars are the ones that are transitioning from elected to appointed in June of 2020. So all three of those districts have current searches and start times that we're going to go through in just a minute. The other districts with the stars may not be currently open. Some are, and I'm going to go through those in just a minute. But those are the districts that have appointed superintendents in Florida. Now, the size of the districts that have appointed superintendents vary greatly. Okeechobee is the smallest school district with an appointed superintendent at 6,000, just over 6,000 students. And of course, Miami-Dade is the largest with over 350,000 students. So there's no real general rule that it's just the large districts that have the appointed superintendents. I'm going to go through right now with those districts that are currently undertaking a superintendent search or are expected to within the next year to 18 months. First is Volusia, and they have already started their search. The advertisement period has not yet begun. They're in the process of gathering the qualifications together, and they are working on their promotional and advertisement pieces. But we are expecting that they have a hire date of January 1. So that's really the first one in what I'm getting ready to go through is a series of school districts that are going to be hiring a new superintendent in the next 12 to 18 months. Next is Indian River. They have not yet decided the hire date, but we expect it to be sometime between January and June of 2020. Bill's going to be with me, and I think John Reichert as well. We're going to be in Indian River on Tuesday, and we'll have a better idea of what their time frame is, but we're told it's going to be early in the new year. After that, we know that in Monroe County, the superintendent down there, Mr. Porter, is retiring in June of 2020, so they'll be hiring then. Flagler, superintendent, also retiring June of 2020. Hillsborough, also retiring June of 2020. Marion originally had said June of 2020, even though they're transitioning from an elected to appointed, but I'm told now that date of June 2020 may not be firm, and it could be November of 2020, which is the end of the current superintendent's elected term. So that one I do need to tell you is either June or November of 2020. Martin, which is also transitioning from elected to appointed, so that transition will take place November of 2020. And also Escambia, same thing, transitioning from elected to appointed in November of 2020. So as you can see, we have 8 tentatively open positions that will be hiring sometime between January and November of 2020. Now, one question that we get frequently is about resume and what sort of expectations boards have for superintendent candidates that would put the candidates in the top tier, or what we like to call in the finalist top 10, top 5, certainly the top 3, which means you'd certainly get an interview. So the first thing that I have to tell you is boards definitely look for formal education. Now, as a superintendent search firm, we try very hard to get them to say master's required, doctorate preferred. However, there are some districts that decide a doctorate is a requirement. So the formal education from an accredited institution is going to be very important. It's going to help candidates if they have, even if they're unofficial transcripts at the time, but if they can submit transcripts with their applications. We certainly, when we're doing a search, request that applicants will send a cover letter, resume, and unofficial transcripts at that time. And if you become a finalist, there will be an expectation that you'll be able to deliver official transcripts. But we need to see those early on. There's been, as you all probably know from headlines, some falsification of formal education in resumes. And so we want to make sure right from the start that any questions of that are removed from the table. But we also talk a lot with school districts, school boards about the experience that the candidates will bring to the table. And you can see from the number of items here, finance and budget, curriculum, employee relations, community involvement, advocacy, facilities, all of these areas are going to be helpful. What we suggest to people who are interested in becoming a superintendent is that you try to give yourself as many varied opportunities in these areas as you possibly can. So be the person who volunteers to be on the negotiating team. Be the person who volunteers to help with redistricting. Be the person who volunteers to do some of the advocacy work, either with your local delegations, maybe in Tallahassee, or maybe even in DC. Be the person that is responsible for overseeing the construction of some new facilities. Anything that any candidate can bring to the table is going to help them stand out from what we typically have as a pretty large crowd of interested candidates. Now, I say that, but just because we have a large crowd doesn't mean they're all qualified. So I don't want that to discourage anyone. But I will tell you, boards are looking very closely at ability to affect positively student achievement. They're looking at district size. So a very large district has concerns about somebody that's only had experience in a small district. They want someone who's had some amount of experience in a district similar in size, maybe similar in demographics, or even someone with experience in a more challenging set of demographics than what the seeking district has. Bargaining is always helpful because that's such a big category, such a big area, so knowledge of bargaining is going to be invaluable. Technology is, as everyone I'm sure knows, becoming more and more important, and it's just not an option anymore for superintendents to let somebody else do all the technological presentations, and board members are really looking for people who are very innovative, new ideas. They really are looking to infuse energy into their district whenever they're making a change. Somebody who has some experience or certainly keeps up with current research. Somebody who has experience in referendums. Many of the administrators that are on the phone right now may not be aware that in last year's election cycle, there were 23 local referenda that school boards put on the ballot, and 23 of them passed. 23 out of 23, 100% of local school board initiatives passed. So anything that boards need to bring before their community, they're looking for people who have experience being able to do that. I'll pause for just a moment and see if Bill Vogel, if you have anything you want to add about resume expectations.
Andrea, I think you did an excellent job on talking about what should be included on the resume. One suggestion that we like to see on our resumes, though, too, is for each position that the individual has held to list the accomplishments under each of those positions. And we like to see using data and numbers and improvement in those areas. Two areas, like you say, the superintendent, is the first and foremost is the instructional leader. So what I see school boards looking for is evidence of how the superintendent or the person, whatever position you're in currently, has led improvement in student achievement. If the school district is not an A, the boards are going to want a superintendent who can lead them to that A. The other critical area that I see school boards looking for is graduation rate, and maybe what the applicant has done to improve the graduation rate in that district. Andrea, I think you also said something very important about the budget. One of the areas that school boards are always interested in is the experience that the applicant has with the Florida Education Finance Program, the FEFP. I think that gives Florida applicants an advantage over someone from out of state because of the uniqueness of the FEFP. So that would be something that I'd recommend that the applicant, for someone's interested in that, learn about the budget in their district, as well as the district that they might be interested in. And finally, Andrea, you said something about 23 school districts have passed either referendums, increased sales tax or millage. This is very critical, and what we found is districts that do not have the millage or the sales tax have a real struggle with their budget maintaining the 3% state minimum. So the more information that the applicant has on the FEFP, I think that will also be a benefit to them.
Great, thanks, John. Now I want to kind of go over the process because it is kind of a long process. In fact, sometimes when school boards reach out to us and say, hey, we're going to do a superintendent search, how much time do we need? We really like 6 months or more to do the best possible search and be able to find the best match for a school district. The first thing that's going to happen when a district needs a superintendent is that they're typically going to select a consultant. Now that's the role that FSBA can serve. There are a number of national headhunting agencies or search firms. In some cases, some districts decide to try to run the search themselves. We actually discourage that because we believe that it puts the HR department sort of in a bad position when they're doing the search for the person that's going to end up being who they report to. But the first thing that's going to happen is that they're going to choose their consultant. Once they've decided on their consultant, then with and through that consultant, they're going to make some decisions about the level of community involvement. And we do all sorts of different kinds of community involvement. But as a candidate, it would be interesting if you went back, and typically they would have some of the meetings would be recorded that would have the community involvement input, or there would be summary reports. And it would help you to understand what the community is looking for if you went back into the minutes of some of the meetings and were able to look up those summary reports and kind of see what the community has said that they're looking for. Once the community has weighed in, then typically the school board is going to come up with what qualifications they're looking for. We tell boards that the person they're looking for today is different than the person that they would have looked for 5 years ago or will be looking for in 5 years if they need a new superintendent, because priorities change. It could be that at this point, a district is a stronger curriculum leader and not as much focus on budget. And then 5 years ago, it could have been that they were in a financial challenge, and so they needed a strong financial person. So they're going to kind of look at qualifications, and of course they want the best qualifications all the way around, but they also recognize, because we work with them to understand that they're not going to get 100% of everything, so they're going to have to give up a little to get something. And if they're looking for someone stronger in budget, that person may not have the strength of curriculum. That's why superintendents build teams. Typically, the job is going to be posted somewhere between 3 and 9 weeks. Most of the places that you'll find these jobs are Ed Week for sure. FASA certainly has a place on their website, and there's a number of other avenues. One thing we do suggest is that if you are interested in receiving information about the job postings that come through our office, you let either me or John, Michelle can pass on. Just give us your name and your email, and then when jobs become available, we'll send you the announcement. You can go, typically, we try to have each district have a portal, if you will, on their home page of their website, and you can just click on the portal at any open school district that we work with, and just click the button, and you'll get all the information you need about that particular search. So the ones that I showed you a few minutes ago, if you just keep checking their websites at some point, I would expect that each one of them would have on their home page a button that says Superintendent Search, Learn More here, and you can just click on that. After the jobs have been posted for a number of weeks, as soon as the deadline occurs, then the applications are reviewed and vetted. It's during this time in some districts that communities will help, community members, volunteers, will help the board vet some of the applications. And Michelle, since we're all friends here, Bill and I will tell you that any given superintendent search, I would say up to half of the candidates really are not qualified to be superintendents. We've got people who are maybe a science teacher in Connecticut who just decides they want to apply to be a superintendent in Florida. And there's a big leap between being a science teacher to being a superintendent and a number of requirements in between, but not everybody recognizes that. So sometimes the community sort of helps vet and then moves forward applications that they believe the board ought to continue to consider. And we, as their search firm, when we're selected, do the same thing. We don't prioritize candidates. We say this is your top first choice candidate, second choice, third choice. But we say here is a pool of candidates that we believe are the most qualified from the pool that we got, the larger pool. Some boards ask us to bring the top sort of 10. Some boards ask for 8. Some boards, you know, it just depends on what that board wants. And our job is to sort of help the board find not just the most qualified, but also the best match for them, because each district is different and we really want a good fit with board and superintendents. So once that happens, then the board typically will decide on some semi-finalists, and they may have as many as 8 or 10, I think is the largest amount that we've had. And they would typically ask the semi-finalists to respond to some questions. They may be in written form, they ask for their response, or we're actually going to be branching out into some video responses so that the board can kind of get a feel for the candidate in a visual, and they can kind of get a feel for the ability of the candidate to communicate through electronic means. So then once the answers to the questions come in from the semifinalists, then the boards typically will drill down and come up with typically 5 or fewer finalists that they want to interview face-to-face for the position of superintendent. So once the interviewees are selected and all the arrangements are made, then the finalists will come to the school district and meet with the school board, both as a large group, as a body, almost like a normal school board meeting. There'll be 5 or 7 or 9, depending on the number of school board members in a public meeting, and the candidate will sit and answer questions, typically for an hour, hour and 15, 20 minutes. And then additionally, there will be one-on-one interviews with each individual board member for each candidate. And those would not be recorded. They would not be public meetings. They would just be one-on-one meetings between board members and candidates. Some districts, actually Alachua, a few years ago when we were doing their superintendent search, they actually had some community interviews. They had some community groups that interviewed the candidates as well as the board. So it just kind of depends on what each individual board wants, but the interviews will be conducted. Once the interviews are conducted, the board reconvenes and board members discuss who they believe is going to be the best fit for their district. They make a decision, and once they make that decision, then they call the candidate and say, we'd love to have you come and be our superintendent. And then we enter into contract negotiations. And it's during the contract negotiations that there's conversation about what might be a transition period, what kind of overlap, if any, with the departing superintendent would occur, and you know, how much time does the new superintendent need to give to the current employer? What, if any, role could the new superintendent play while the current superintendent may still be there? Sometimes they come on in the form of a consultant for a week or 2 or however that might be, but that's what we call the transition period. And then the first day begins. Bill, do you want to tell me if I've left anything out of this process.
Andrea, I think you've done an excellent job doing that, running through that process. A couple of thoughts from the superintendent perspective. With several school districts being open over the next 2 years, here are some suggestions that I think might be helpful for a prospective superintendent to decide on which districts to apply for. Right now, I'd say the first thing I would do is start looking and viewing board meetings of the school boards and learn about that district by viewing board meetings. And in this way, you'll get to know what the priorities are, learn about the board members, and then an important decision to make when you apply is make sure that your family is on board with you when you apply. And a suggestion would be to actually visit the district that you think would be interested in with your family. Spend a weekend there, because the expectation for superintendents is that they live and work in the community and are a part of the community. So once you make that decision, then I would start looking at the vision and beliefs or core values and strategic plan of the school district to make sure there's an alignment between your beliefs and what the school board is interested in. Superintendents, new superintendents will have an opportunity to be part of a strategic planning process or an update, but the board will make that final decision and vote on what the goals are for that particular district. So I think that is really important. And I can't emphasize how important that the relationship with school board members is for a superintendent. There needs to be open, honest communications. And I think this is something else that applicants will, I'm sure, start doing now in their own districts, is in working with the school board members and keeping them engaged and up to date and involved.
All right, so let me give a quick school board member perspective. The first thing that candidates need to know is that school board, there's a small group of school board members in this state. We don't have 1,000, we don't have 2,000 like some other states. We have about 360. And so that means that most school board members know each other. So the odds of the school board members in the district that someone's applying to calling the district where the candidate currently is are very high. So you want to make sure that you have a pretty good relationship with the current school board members. And by pretty good relationship, I don't mean you agree with them all the time. I certainly don't mean that you cater to them, but that when people ask about you, the current school board members with whom you interact would say that you're fair, that you present both sides of a story, that you, you know, that you're not undermining other staff members. Not that, well, sometimes, who knows. But what you would want is, you don't have to be, what I don't want is candidates to think that because they know school board members are going to call other school board members, that means they have to do anything special with their school board members. But they definitely need to have those school board members say, yes, they respond to questions, yes, they are honest and forthright in communications, yes, they're hardworking and responsive to principals, that sort of thing. Additionally, I will say that one thing we tell the school boards is that there is no Superman or Superwoman. It doesn't exist. So they need to sort of temper their desires for the perfect candidate. Every candidate that comes in is very, very different with their combination of experiences and history. And so the job that the candidates have to do with the school board members is to help them see how their particular history of experiences is going to benefit the district. So when you come to an interview, what school board members want to know is that you've spent some time, as Bill just mentioned, you've spent some time learning about their district. I remember one particularly strong candidate who actually came to a school district, probably I would guess over several weekends. She actually took pictures of every school so she could learn the school, feel for the school. She pulled all the data on each of the schools. When you asked this candidate about what do you think are the challenges that this district has, she was fully able to articulate that it was science in 5th grade on the elementary schools on the east side. I mean, she knew what she was talking about. She had done her homework, and it was very impressive. And you have to expect that there are going to be candidates who do that level of homework. I will also tell you that school board members will Google candidates. And everyone, we try to tell them every single candidate is going to have some blogger who has condemned them for some decision that they've made. And it's really important for us as consultants and for you as candidates to understand that as long as you can explain what happened, that's really the only deterrent. If you have 10 lawsuits against you, but it's because you were the principal at the special needs school and there was something there particularly specific to being the special needs school, board members can understand that. They get that. They know that if people are put in positions of authority, they're going to have to make difficult decisions that some people don't like along the way. So we have every expectation that when a board member Googles a candidate, something is going to come up or hit. And it's just how you're able to explain that, and you need to be prepared to explain that, that's important. Additionally, what board members really are looking for, and Bill already hit on that, is someone that they can have a good relationship with. That doesn't mean they want to be your friend, and it doesn't mean you're going to go out to dinner all the time. What it means is that they want someone who's going to be open and honest and communicative with them, and someone with whom they can be open and honest and communicative. But I will also tell you, the best superintendents are able to help lead the board. So you need to have the confidence that you can tell board members that this is when board members are maybe overstepping their authority, or when superintendents have to make some difficult decisions, let's say in the area of personnel. It's important that you have the confidence that you can help lead the board through some difficult, challenging situations. Bill, do you want to give us superintendent's perspective of the process?
Sure will. Andrea, I think you did an excellent job on that. I wanted to just reflect on something you said about that one candidate that did an analysis of all the schools. One of the things that I would do is every year I get the chart that has all of the FSA that make up the grades. And for example, it has the percentage of students that achieve in English language arts and all of those particular areas. And those are the components that make up the total number of points or grades. I would have, if I was applying for superintendent, I would be very familiar with those for that particular district. And just like you said, even breaking it down to schools, because you can get that all online, and that is something that would be very impressive to a school board, that you had that much knowledge of the district. You also mentioned something I think that is extremely important, and it's critical, is the relationship with the school board. And I liked the quote that Rick Shirley, who's a longtime superintendent in Sumter County, said. He said, "First graders like surprises, superintendents and board members don't." So you said it very well, that the more communication that you can have with the school board members, and even the school board members that you happen to work with in your current role right now, the more successful that you are going to be. I think that you covered pretty much from the superintendent's perspective, that, you know, when you start by learning about the vision, mission, and beliefs and core values, look at what the district has going in the area of building and construction. The more that you can take your resume and your cover letter and focus your resume into how you can meet that particular area that's a priority of the board, the better it will help you, because the first step in this whole process is a resume paper screen. So whatever you put together that is sent in, whether it's an advisory committee that reviews it, and board members get all that, and that's important. So put your best foot forward when you start with your resume.
Yeah, and if you already as a potential superintendent know that there are 2 or 3 districts that you think you're a good fit with, and you know they're going to be looking for a superintendent in the next 12 to 18 months, put a Google alert on the school board of that district and just kind of read and keep up with the developments of things, because you can really learn a lot about the feel of a district by the summaries that come up in the newspaper after every school board meeting. And you'll also learn the big issues, especially as we head into the back to school time. From the search consultant perspective, and Bill, I want you to help me with this, but when we're running a search, we answer a lot of questions for candidates long before the candidate's final application packet may even be turned in. And in fact, in some cases, we'll get an application and there may be a piece or 2 missing. And rather than just not moving the applicant forward, we try to flag it and call you and say, hey, somehow let's just say it's your unofficial transcripts. Somehow we did not get your unofficial transcripts. Were they supposed to be in there? Where are they? Can you fax them over? We try to help you make sure that your packet is complete so that you will be able to move forward in the search process. But the other thing that we try to do is really help you get your questions answered and get our questions answered. We've had candidates that have had not just academic flags, but we have had some flags with regard to, Bill, and you can help me out here. I remember one candidate, there was something about a ticket, and it was like on Thanksgiving Day or something, and the candidate had parked the car on the opposite side of the street and forgotten to move it or something like that. So it's just a matter of kind of helping us be able to explain away some of the things that may show up when you get to the finalist level and they do certain levels of background searching, because they have to make sure that when they hire you, there's not going to be a giant scandal in the community. And so just helping us help you is important. Bill, do you want to add to that?
Yes, I'd like to. I think, Andrea, one of the things that sets us apart, I think, as a search firm is the relationship we build, just like you're saying, with those people that apply. Many times we will, if people ask us, we'll review their resume, we'll answer any questions, we're always available. And because what we want to do is present the best that the candidate has to offer to the school board. If the candidate makes the finals, we do everything we can to help them with interview process, and we're really there for them as well as we are representing the school board. I think you said it was very important, though, if you are an applicant and there is something like this situation that you described, please let us know if we're the search firm and we can talk that through with you, because superintendent applicants go through an extensive background check, probably the most extensive background check you'll probably ever have. And things do come up, and we want to make sure that we can help you through situations that might be embarrassing as you go through the process.
Yeah, and that I do want to say one more thing about that, because the Florida Sunshine Law, everyone probably on this phone call is familiar with it. Many of the people on this phone call probably have been principals and even assistant superintendents. But once you apply to be a superintendent, it's a whole different ballgame. And the level of scrutiny and the level of interest in every single thing that you have done intensifies. And I don't say that to scare you, but I do say that to prepare you, because if you're not prepared for that, it can be overwhelming. And that's something that every candidate is surprised by. But what that also means is that if you submit some written documents, please make sure that you are the author of those documents. Please make sure that there's not somebody out there who can say, wait, that looks really, really close to the work that I have done before, and I've worked with this person before, so maybe that's my work that this person is presenting, because those are the kinds of things that will pop out quickly if you're not experienced with the Sunshine Law. And then we're going to answer some questions. Michelle, I know you have a list of questions, and we've probably created more questions than we even have time to answer.
Thanks, Andrea. One of the questions that I was asked prior to the webinar is, should I let my superintendent know that I have an interest in applying for another position?
Bill, do you want to answer that first?
Yes, I would say in most cases, I would talk with your superintendent about your interest in applying for another position. And in many occasions, the superintendents might identify you as a potential superintendent for another district, or maybe even to follow them when they retire. So, in most cases, I would recommend that the applicant discuss this with the superintendent, because, like Andrea said, once you decide you are going to apply, it's going to be a public record. And I think it would also, if you are going to go ahead and apply, is I would also talk with your current school board members so they know about it also, so they're not surprised when they read about it.
And I would agree. I think it's really important to talk to your current superintendent. I will tell you, the best superintendents I know develop leaders, and they want people who are on their team to be skilled and ready to take over in their district or another district should anything happen. So the best superintendents I know are looking for people on their team who want to be superintendents so they can continue to develop them. But also, if you tell your superintendent that you're interested, then your superintendent very well may help you to find those opportunities to broaden your resume.
Great. Another question that we had, and I think you sort of addressed this when you were talking about candidates that frequently reach out to you all during this process, but can or should a candidate communicate directly with school board members?
That's honestly at your own peril. It's a risk. I will say that it is a risk. Now, there are times that school board members will reach out directly to candidates. That's a different story, because then they're taking the initiative. Now, we discourage against it, but that doesn't mean they always take our advice. I would say reaching out directly to school board members is something you just need to be very cautious of. That being said, it's very different at a conference, like at our June conference that we just completed. If you are an assistant superintendent and you happen to be having lunch next to school board members from a county that happens to be looking for a superintendent, and you speak in generalities, but reaching out to a school board member and saying, I want to be your next superintendent, I think it's a risk, because it puts the board member in a bad position. And what we don't want is board members having made any sort of commitments or pledges to anyone, because I think everybody knows that one board member's vote is nearly 20% of the conversation. And so it's just a very perilous thing. That being said, in open meetings, so maybe there's a regional consortium meeting of some sort, talking to people as you normally would is fully appropriate, and answering questions if a board member initiates is fully appropriate. But approaching a board member and saying, I'm interested, I know you're going to do a search, I really would like to work for you, I believe is a risk. Bill?
Andrew, I think you've done an excellent job answering that. But I do agree, one thing that's interesting is school board members that know they have an opening coming up in the near future over the next couple of years, they're also talking to other board members, and if they're at a consortium meeting or a meeting, they're also looking at possibly you as a potential applicant too. So it kind of goes both ways. But it is, if there is a networking opportunity at an event or a conference, certainly, you know, that's a good opportunity to just have a casual conversation with a board member. And don't be surprised if a board member comes up and talks to you after you make a presentation, maybe let's say at Central Florida School Board Coalition or somewhere like that. If they like what they hear, they may be talking to you.
Great, thank you. Another question on, and if someone is currently a principal, and so they may not have the opportunity in the district to be on a negotiating team directly, or in all of the activities or areas that you mentioned, how is the best way for a principal to get started in collecting those experiences in their resume?
Bill, do you want to start?
Yes, there a challenge. A principal is leading a school which is part of a school district, and the superintendent has to look at the whole district and all of the schools. So there is a challenge in getting the experiences when you're at the principal level. That's why conversations with the superintendent about your interest might open the door for you to have more opportunities. That being said, though, there are many superintendents in Florida, some elected and some appointed, that have come from the principal ranks and been very successful. So a lot just depends on the priorities that the board might set, the size of the district, and the experiences that you might have as a principal. The one thing I would say, if you have principal experience, you have to look beyond just being a champion of your school. You have to look big picture at the entire district.
Yes, and I was going to say, if you're a principal, you definitely want to focus on systems. So it's not just how one school transportation flows, it's looking at multiple schools' transportation flows. So even within a school, you could say, look at the systems of the different departments, or anything that focuses you on systems. But the other thing I would say is, principals who have experiences at different grade levels are also very valuable. So someone who's been an elementary principal and a high school principal, or a middle school principal and a high school principal, anything you can do that can give you a different perspective. You don't want to have only experience being a principal at a suburban school. That's not gonna probably be enough to convince a board that you're ready to take on an entire school district. But if you've been a principal in a very challenging Title I school, and then you've gone to another Title I middle school or something like that, that would be more appealing.
Andrea, I think you've done that's an excellent response, and I would add to that, there are always opportunities to serve on committees in districts. It might be the dress code committee, or or any type of committee opportunity that you have as a principal to get more experience outside the school would be a real help. And I will say, though, that some school boards set requirements for district level executive experience. Others, will go ahead and say the principal experience will be fine. So it's going to be a lot depend on the school district itself.
But also, I would say, start applying for some district level administrative opportunities. And even if you think it's a little bit out of your comfort zone, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, because the more varied your resume can be, the better. But board members really do want to see some district level experience for the most part. Now if you're an amazing principal, that's a different story. You may be able to just carry it with your own principal resume, but by and large, they're going to want someone who's been a principal and had some level of district experience.
That's great. Thank you so much for those answers. I don't see any other questions currently submitted. And so what I wanted to do is see if Dr. Mixon was there still on the line and maybe wanted to give his thoughts and as we wrap up here from FASA.
Yes, Michelle, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, for those of you who have gotten on the call, I can tell you that FASA, FSBA, and FADS, all of us on the public school team, we want the very best leaders we can get. We're very pleased and excited that we were able to partner with the Florida School Boards Association, Andrea and Bill, and their team on this. We will do everything that we can to promote outstanding leaders in the state of Florida. We face very challenging times. We feel that public education is very key to our very democracy. It's key to equity in this country, and it's a key to our economy. So we think that your job and what you want to do is very, very important. We're very pleased to be part of this process. Michelle, thank you for hosting us. Andrea, Bill, thank you. And I invite any participants who have any questions from this point on, you can give them to us and we will pass them on to Bill and Andrea, or you can call them directly. If you call the School Boards Association, they will tell you how to get in touch with Bill. But Andrea is very open to speaking with you. So if you have further questions, be sure and get with us. Thank you, Michelle.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Andrea and Bill, before I let you go, we did have one other question come in on how detailed should their resume be?
Bill, do you want to?
Yeah, I think the key on the resume would be to be very specific and have a reasonable length. You know, I would say 4 or 5 pages at the most. You've got to strike a balance. You've got to make sure you cover all your areas of experience and your accomplishments, but you don't want to make it too lengthy. There shouldn't be any fillers on it. Have it very direct, specific with numbers that back up your accomplishments. Andrea, why don't you add to that?
Well, it's interesting that this question came in today because I'm reminded of one packet that we received that had a photocopy of all of the sort of plaques on someone's wall. And Bill, I don't know if you remember that, but it was a bit much. So I think focusing on, first off, knowing the district and reading what they're looking for in the qualifications, you're going to have a pretty good idea of what they're looking for. So highlighting the experiences that you've had that best meet the needs that the district has identified, kind of connecting your experience to their desires. You don't have to put everything on there. I mean, at this point in your career, we don't need to know that you were the department chair when you taught 20 years ago, but we do want to know the main achievements and accomplishments that you've been able to bring to your current and most recent administrative position. So I don't think you need to go back so far, other than to let people know maybe that you were a teacher, but the administrative experience is really what they're going to be looking for at this point. But it does help them to know that you were a teacher, but they don't need to know that you worked at McDonald's in high school. Bill, I think you might agree. But you know what, Michelle, something else occurred to me that I did want to bring up, and that is our goal is for school districts to have a successful school board superintendent team. And that helps us not just with a superintendent search, but with Florida Public Education. And so in that vein, we have had candidates apply or talk to us about applying for certain jobs that we knew, because we know the board, we know the community, and we typically know the candidates, that we knew might not be the best fit for the candidate or for the board. And so there are times, and I remember one specifically when we had a very, very sort of a openly and well-known conservative candidate who was getting ready to apply in a very, very more liberal community. And we specifically said, you know, I don't think this is the right fit for you, because it really could have created some unnecessary distractions from the work of the district. And so our goal when we're the search consultant is to help the board find the right fit. But in doing so, we also want to protect the reputation of the candidates. We want to protect the success of the candidates, but we also will be very honest in some cases. And so we're not going to, we would not put candidates in a situation that we don't think they could be successful in that district. And we wouldn't put a board in a situation where we would be recommending candidates that we don't think would be a good fit. So I just kind of wanted to make that clear.
Okay, and then let me ask this one final question before we close out for the evening. What is the advantage or disadvantage for trying to become a superintendent in your current district?
Well, you know, it's funny. I just spoke at length to a reporter in Hillsborough County on this very topic, and there are both advantages and disadvantages. An advantage is that the board knows you. A disadvantage is that the board knows you. You know, I personally, when we go into a district, we ask the board point blank if they have somebody internal on their staff that the board believes could be, would be, and should be the next superintendent. They probably should not go through the exercise of a search. They should hire the person that is in the district and have a smooth transition and move on about their business. It's when the board maybe isn't sure or doesn't know whether or not a candidate either wants the job or is fully qualified for the job, or maybe is even the best fit for the job. And sometimes boards want to do what they will call a national search, which all searches are national now with the internet. But in some cases, doing a search and having a local candidate apply and get the job is validation that they have the right people in staff and that they've developed people properly. We've done a lot of searches where internal candidates have gotten the job, but that doesn't always happen. And so in some cases, because a person has grown their whole career in a district, people might not see them necessarily as the leader of the district, and they may need to step out and go to a new community. You know, everything always means more when someone from the outside says it. So there are strengths and there are pluses, minuses, strengths and weaknesses of both coming up through a district and coming in from outside. Bill?
Andrea, I think that you've answered it well. If the district is working and is very successful, and the board is satisfied with the direction the district is going, a lot of times the board will want to hire an internal candidate. It just depends on each individual circumstance.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We are 2 minutes short of 1 hour here. And again, Andrea and Bill, I'll echo Dr. Mixon's thank you for your knowledge and sharing that with our attendees today. We will be sharing more information about this as we go forward and sharing this recorded webinar with FASA members. And we really appreciate your time to everyone this evening, and have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you all soon. Again, you can reach out to FASA or FSBA online or at our office via phone. We look forward to talking with you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. We hope to see a lot of candidates.
Yes, thanks, Andrea.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.